Being supercharged to me means that you have incredible energy.
I have a lot more energy to keep up with my kids.
The extreme cold is my extreme warm friend.
Now, if you get supercharged, all the people around you start to get supercharged too.
Certain kinds of waters not only good for your health, but I've seen evidence that they can actually reverse irreversible pathologies. This is the future.
We have like 60 million kids and young adults, and the awesome statistic is this could be the first generation that don't outlive their parents. So now instead of longevity going up, now it's going to be going down.
A lot of us are hobbling, we're not moving the right way, we're carrying extra weight, we're sluggish, we're slow.
I was very obese, severely obese. I was over 320 pounds. I was just really unhealthy and very tired and sick all the time.
20 years ago, chronic fatigue syndrome wasn't really a recognised illness, and especially things like adrenal fatigue were just not really heard of. But at that time I was only 22, and literally it looked like my life was over, and nobody knew what to do. And I thought to myself, well, probably the best way of getting over this illness is to just climb and do loads of exercise. And I thought, all the fresh air and good food and mountain exercise would heal me. Nothing could have been further from the truth, and obviously if I'd known what I know now, because I was so strong-willed, actually just pushing and pushing actually just took me all the way down to sort of almost the bottom. It's like I had all this willpower to try things and try and get out of it, but my body literally didn't have the energy to do anything with it. Once I got back to England, I sort of started this 8-year-long journey of having full-on bed-bound chronic fatigue.
It was very difficult to see your son, who's a bouncy, healthy, active person, slipping downhill completely. You felt completely helpless. Our conventional doctors here they said, well, you've got this virus, and we don't know what to do about it.
So Sarah, how I went from sickly sludge to supercharged is, firstly I activated my body's healing system using energy medicine, but the second thing I did was learn how to use other sources of energy outside of food.
And what I'd like to know is, what is the science behind how to use those other sources of energy? Because traditional biochemistry doesn't really cover that. So I'd like to speak to some experts in that field. I'm thinking of people like Professor Jerry Pollak.
There's so much evidence that water is so central to everything that the body does.
And then also Dr. Stephen Sinatra, who's written about grounding or earthing. and how you can get electrons into your body through that way.
What people don't realize is that these vibrations are unseen forces.
And perhaps we can look at other sources of energy like light, movement, those kinds of things.
And what I'd also like to do is go and meet a number of biohackers who are taking this idea of how to increase their body's energy to a whole nother level. Because although I've cured myself of chronic fatigue, I'd like to have even more energy so I'm able to achieve more from life. And the first person I'd like to go and interview is Dave Asprey of Bulletproof, because he was able to go from a beast and having a low amount of energy to now being pretty much a superhuman business machine.
Bottom line is my body is an amazing piece of equipment that is designed to survive in the environment around it.
I'd also like to go and meet Wim Hof, who is the Iceman and is able to climb up Everest just in his underwear, which we would all love to do, I'm sure.
They think they are not able to go into ice water. And that very mind is crippling them.
And also Abel James, who is got an incredible amount of energy and is known as the fat-burning man.
In every point in history, the biggest mistake that societies in general have made is that we know everything right now, and we will move forward based upon all of those assumptions.
And also Ben Greenfield, who is an athletic machine.
So when the light bulb went on for me, when I realized that the way that I was training, the way I was eating, my environment, everything was not allowing me to have the longevity that I wanted.
And then perhaps we should also visit some lay people, some people who are actually putting all of these things into practice and see how they're getting on.
Yeah, I mean, there's some incredible stories like Jeremy, who has cystic fibrosis, but you would never know it because he does all of this rock climbing and has a huge amount of energy for life.
I was born supercharged and I want to stay that way.
And then there's Kate Towler and her kids, who have basically managed to help reverse the autism of her kids.
Ryan, our son, has autism, which makes the mix a little bit interesting between the weight loss and the autism.
And we also have Joe Polish, who was originally a drug addict but has managed to transform his life through movement and exercise, and also through changing his mental habits.
And so somehow I learned that I can create my own internal power. I can learn how to do this.
Okay, so once we've spoken to some of our experts and our biohackers, we should have a good idea of how to get energy in the body and how to maintain energy and have that energy for life.
Let's go and do it.
I have cystic fibrosis. I was diagnosed when I was 4 months old. So the biggest frustration is whenever they try to compare one patient to another, when there's so many things that are different about us that make up really who we are.
In spite of following this advice from my doctor and traditional media so well, I was at basically in the worst health of my entire life.
Why are people still so sick and tired? Why are people still settling for mediocrity and just being free of symptoms as a way of life, rather than sort of living an optimized and supercharged life? A one-size-fits-all approach to health doesn't work. We're all different, we're all genetically different. Why is the medical system so slow to take up this information?
So the crazy thing is that people will see, like let's say, for example, a bodybuilder, right? They'll see a bodybuilder on stage and the person looks good, right? They're like our society's expectation of what extreme manliness or extreme femininity. But what it takes to get that kind of body, at least the stereotypical approach, then you take a closer look. And this is what I did to myself. And when you look at what's going on the inside, you've got somebody who's healthy on the outside, but they're dying on the inside.
From a guy that refused to sit in a box, my cubicle was killing me and I knew it. When I was 16, I took control and I stopped doing everything I was supposed to. I learned then that I can crash this thing if I want to. I started listening to my body. I definitely woke up one day and realized this is mine, and nobody knows more about it than I do. I want to be moving. I want to be working hard, and everything about my disease is about momentum, and I'm not willing to give that up. It's always been about staying ahead, and I'm not trying to outsmart my doctors or trying to make them feel dumb, but sometimes I feel like the tools that we're using, the ones that are in bottles and pills and IV bags, maybe that's not the most effective ones.
I don't think medicine is really there to get answers. I mean, they're basically there to keep people taking drugs as long as possible, because it's the only way they can maximise their profits.
I don't know, I mean, I do think there is a place for drugs, and I think it's acute care, but I do think for chronic conditions, it definitely seems to be failing.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, for acute care, all good, but most illness has nothing to do with acute care.
Doctors, the hospitals, pharmacies, pills, medicines, and all kinds of shit making us not happy, but unhappy, and not healthy, but sick.
Most of us are led to believe that our energy comes from food, and of course that we know that to be the case. You know, we eat and we feel energized. However, that's not the only source of energy.
So fundamentally, what life comes down to is energy. We need energy for everything we do. We need energy to move. We need energy for motivation, for passion, for thought. So life is energy.
Don't worry, you're not turning red at all. One more, you got it.
Well, for me, having a lot of energy means that I can get out there and do everything that I want to do in life. I think a lot of people that I certainly see around me are sick and tired of being sick and tired all the time. So to have that energy in your life, really, for a lot of people, it just means that they can just do all of the things that they haven't been able to do. Whether that is looking after the children, getting further in their career, whether it's just having time at the weekend to do the things they like instead of just crashing out on the couch after a week at work. So really, you know, having that energy, being supercharged, is really such a fundamental thing. And really it's in everybody's reach. There are very simple ways to get this energy.
Energy is the most important building block for life. And for instance, when you don't have any energy, you can't really do anything. You can't have a career, you can't be happy, you end up diseased and ill, which is what happened to me. And the opposite of that is when you have abundant energy, you have like a super lightning quick mind, you're much happier, you're able to flourish in your career. And in short, you know, the happiest, most successful people have abundant energy for life.
Everybody knows that we get energy from food, but really, when you think about it from a fundamental point of view, food is just electrons and movement of electrons. And it's electrons flowing through a chain that cause the release of energy in the body.
If you think about how food gives you energy, it gives you electrical energy. And a lot of people say, what, electricity? Like, I'm not a battery. Well, parts of you kind of are like that. Because what happens is you eat food and glucose or fat or protein, these things eventually, we hope, unless they're stored as fat or excreted, they turn into ATP, which is the primary thing that the mitochondria in our cells use. So they generate ATP, they use ATP to get an electron. That would be electrical. And once they generate that electron that fuels the cell, then they recycle ATP through a process in humans that's kind of like what most people know happens in plants with photosynthesis.
I've been steeped in exercise science and nutrition science for decades. And what everybody preaches is the way that you get that ATP is with calories, right? You eat the right protein and carb and fat ratios, and you get your pre and your post-workout nutrition, and you make sure that you have your breakfast and that you eat frequently and you keep your metabolism elevated. But what people don't realize is that only accounts for a fraction of the energy that your body's actually able to produce.
The body is neither chemical nor electrical, it's both. And if you don't believe me, then walk into a taser and see what happens. Like, we know if you put a strong shock on someone, something happens. We measure the flow of electrons across nerves. It's called a nerve conductance study. So we know we're electrical. We just like to think that we're chemical. And that's a broken model, because you can affect the electricity with chemicals and you can affect chemicals with electricity.
And so if we start to think about energy more in terms of electron transfer, then we begin to see that there are other ways that we can get energy into our body.
There are all these other ways that you can increase the electron flow in your body. So, for instance, just like a plant does photosynthesis, you can use light to create electrons in your body through structured water.
There's one source of energy that comes from light. We have direct evidence that the light produces energy.
If you're not taking into consideration your body's charge based on the amount of light that you are getting, the amount of light that you aren't getting, or even the type of light that you're getting, blue light versus red light versus sunlight, then what that means is that all of your efforts to eat a healthy diet, they're for naught unless your body is actually charged properly.
You can also do things like grounding, where electrons are sort of coming up through the earth and through your feet. But also, of course, how your biochemistry is really, really important for the flow of electrons, because if you have a healthy internal mineralized sea, then you'll get a very healthy flow of electrons through your body.
The most crucial thing for our health and for getting and maintaining energy in the body is being in the correct environment.
When you change the environment around you or the environment inside you, your biology responds. You don't will your biology to do something. You give your biology a signal, and the signal your biology listens to isn't what you want. It listens to what the environment tells it. So I consciously manipulate the inputs to my body so that it will behave itself. And when it does that, it unleashes a huge amount of willpower and energy.
And from my perspective, the environment is at least as important, or perhaps more important, than the food you actually ingest. And I know in my own case, when I was trying to get better from chronic fatigue, I'd followed a really, really strict, super healthy diet for years and years, yet I was still ill. But the moment I actually changed my environment, started changing my relationships, started changing, in fact, where I lived, some of the activities that I was doing, making sure that I was getting out in the sun and like doing activities where I was connected to Earth's electrons. The moment I started doing that, my energy levels started to soar, and my diet was consistently the same, both in the early stages of my illness and also when I changed my environment.
I change my diet, and I change the way I exercise. I change the temperature of things around me. I change the type of light that I'm exposed to, the time I sleep, the time I eat, the time I exercise. Those matter greatly, because bottom line is my body's an amazing piece of equipment that is designed to survive in the environment around it. So it senses and responds to that environment. It doesn't sense and respond to what I want very well. So I'm going to stop using my willpower, wasting it on trying to make my body do things, and instead say, this is the lever, this is the trigger, this is the switch I can throw that will make my body listen and respond.